By the way, let all conversations that find their home in American politics meet with that enthusiastic
I
reaction.
appreciate it. Thank you.
So today we are here, Stacey, to talk a little bit about what gives us hope in American politics. Mm-hmm. And anytime we're going to do that, there is an aspect of what also gives us some fear, I think. So I wanted to start with where I ended the introduction. You are someone who has led a blended life across the sectors. What has someone who has started businesses, led, authored, taught, what has all of that meant to you as someone who is a civic leader?
So democracy, first of all, Oliver, thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for such a generous introduction. But don't ever make me go after Muhammad again. So democracy is not a thing, it is a construct. It is this idea of shared power, shared reality, not always shared outcomes, but shared intention and access. And so my life across all of those sectors is basically I call myself the Costco of democracy. On different shelves, there are different things you need. On some shelves, you need political access. On other shelves, you need economic access. For a lot of folks, it's this individual power, belief that you have the right to dream and want and aspire, but you also should have the right to live inside your house and have health care when you need it. Plus, we just like to be entertained because sometimes we just need relief. And so my mother, when I was younger, she told me once, she was like, you don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. She was saying pick something. What I heard was try everything. And for me, all of the pieces, in my head at least, they all merge together. I write because I want us to imagine the world that we want. And it's going to be scary and fun. It's going to have disappointments and thrills. If you're lucky, it'll have some romance. I write romance novels too. The civic space is about how do we make certain that our shared reality is made manifest. I do politics when it's not working. And I start companies because I believe that people should have the right to take care of themselves and their communities. Like, I grew up poor. I like money. It's fun. I don't have as much of it as I want. Very few do. But not everyone wants to be a millionaire. A lot of folks just want to be thousandaires. They want to have the ability to take care of themselves and have the space to concern themselves with the rest of the world around them. And so because I want to know how things work, I start companies. Because I want politics to be better, I run for office. Because I want society to function, I start organizations. And because I want us to find joy, I write books.
Yes, it is. I have found it in the journey of getting involved in politics through this book, an interesting question as to whether the American people now, with this big resurgence of concern about wealth and amassing success, whether the American people are becoming kind of anti-wealth, anti-success, or whether the problem is that of the system is rigged and I can't get my piece of it. And I sense that's kind of what you're talking about.
I mean, most people don't begrudge the wealthy their wealth. They begrudge the barriers to being able to take care of themselves and their families and their communities. And what's even more pernicious, you can clap if you want.
Yeah.
But what's even more pernicious is that we, for the first time, live in a moment where there is no practical belief that more is possible. That we have created this striated society that we haven't seen in almost a century, where those who have so much that it is actually sucking the life out of everyone else. That the middle tier that maintains the system does so believing they can have access to the more, and it's their job to gatekeep for the less. And those who are at, not the bottom, but basically the middle down, have stopped believing that more is possible, or at least it's harder to hold that belief. We used to be a nation of predictable progress, meaning that we believed that if you did the things you're supposed to, progress was possible. We are living in the first generation in a while, and I would say in the history of this country, that does not necessarily hold as its destiny that progress is possible. And that's wrong. It's not impossible. But the last thing I'll say is that these systems, much like democracy, all of these systems that we now see as impermeable are purely of our imagination. We can make it different. We just have to believe so. We have a collective hallucination that pieces of paper are money. If we can imagine that, we can imagine a society that actually creates access, truth, opportunity, and we can remove those constructs, but we have to have the collective hallucination that more is possible.
Yeah. So that would, though, require us, if we're going to have that hallucination together, that collective belief in community, that we would be engaged. And a question that I have for you that is, I think, on many of our minds is, sometimes in the business community and even in our own homes now, swamped in the information and the sad stuff that's going on in the world, we just want to turn politics off. Can we do that? What happens if we ignore politics as individuals and maybe even as businesses and philanthropies like so many in this room run?
This is a terrible way of saying it, but it works. You may not be into politics, but politics is into you, and it is a stalker. And if you watched You know how that turns out. Or Baby Reindeer. When business says, well, we're not into politics, it ignores the fact that what politics refers to is the organization of power and the delivery of services. And we hire people to be in charge of that process. So politics is itself a business. It is the business of society, because we don't always agree, and we all sometimes want the exact same thing at the same time. And so the nature of politics is, how do we organize ourselves to argue for who gets what? When businesses say, well, we're not into politics, they're not telling the truth. They're just not into the politics that don't feel good. And for individuals, when we say we're not into politics, what we mean is we don't think we can win, because we have diminished our sense of power to believe that it belongs to someone else. I grew up in Gulfport, Mississippi. I came of age here in Georgia. I lived in Texas and in Connecticut, and I have never been in a place where power was something I was expected to hold. You were kind enough to elevate me to the role of Speaker of the House. I was minority leader. That was a job in the General Assembly where they gave you leader to make you feel good, but they put minority in front of it so you never forgot your place.
By the way, that was wishful thinking on my part.
Wishful thinking on my part too. But the reason I use that, we have convinced ourselves that the minority is the point, not the leader piece. We have to believe that politics is a mechanism. It is a tool like anything else. And when you decide you don't want to use a hammer, the nail doesn't go away. We have to believe that we are entitled to that power, and the power of politics is the power to organize society in the way we want. And people who decide to pick up the tool get a lot more built. And those of us who exempt ourselves because we're too smart, too important, too jaded to touch that tool, what we're saying is, destroy everything around me, I'm not going to fix it. So for me, politics is not, policy is the goal. Politics is the tool. And anytime politics becomes the end goal, we get crappy policy. And so in this space in particular, there is a power out there and in here that is all about who's going to build the country that we want, the society that we want, the future that we want. And one of the most critical tools is politics.
I'm so glad that you went with a toolkit, because I wanted to ask you, in the operations, the piping of today's democracy here in America, and maybe in some other places as well, it feels like the system is broken, that the pipes aren't working, that maybe this is kind of fundamentally incompatible with what we think of as democracy. What is your view as to the current state of the pipes of our democracy? And if I might inflect that further, what is the role of competition in our politics today?
Those are two very different. So if somebody doesn't want my answer.
We've been censored.
The state of the pipes, we're kind of in, I wouldn't say rusted out, but we are in deep need of retrofitting and replacement. And the reason that matters is that in America in particular, for 60 years, we've been told that our common contribution to society doesn't work. That's government. Government is the business of doing the work of the people. That's what it is. And so when we began this operational devolution, when it was politically savvy, it started on one side of the aisle, but it's a bipartisan frame, unfortunately, these days, because it's a fun thing to say. to mock government, but government is the mechanism of delivering services to people. And when you begrudge or insult or worse, underfund that delivery system, then the mechanism starts to fail. You and I both know if you don't use something, over time it atrophies, or worse, it crumbles. Government's not bad. It's a question of what are you using it to accomplish and who are you serving? And this goes to something you said earlier about information. We've got perfect information in this society. We have very imperfect knowledge, and we conflate the two. Information is what is out there. Knowledge is what you can do with it. And what's happened with the infrastructure of government here and around the world is there is a very brokenness to what we think government should do, because the people who are supposed to be doing it, or the people who should be demanding it, have all kind of conceded that it's not going to work. Thank you. So on the mechanism piece, that's the challenge. On the competition piece, then, the answer is not to divest ourselves of responsibility. I'm actually working on a story right now where I'm talking about privatization, which sounds lovely, until you understand what it means. Privatizing something means adding a profit motive. There should not be a profit motive to water. There should not be a profit motive to justice. I was just, and I say this in, because it's me, you guys know you're going to get this. I was recently at Dilley, the prison camp for children right now in America, for immigrant children. It is a private prison. We are privatizing justice. We are privatizing, and the reason I use privatization and competition, when competition is in service of profit, that does not belong in the space of government, because government should be about how you service people, and profit often stands in direct contradiction of that end. When competition is in service of ideas, that's perfectly appropriate. My job has always been, first and foremost, to collaborate, find where I can work with you. My second job is to compete, force us both to have better ideas and better ways to get things done. Our third job is accountability. Hold ourselves responsible for whether we collaborated effectively and whether we competed responsibly. Competition is important, and I'll tie this all together in this way. The attacks on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are attacks on competition, because this is a society that for 250 years has maintained a fairly steady hum of a community of people who are fairly guaranteed access. And because of the Voting Rights Act, because of suffrage, because of abortion rights, because of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, because of the Respect for Marriage Act, because of Title I, all of these new communities now get to compete for the same things. And there are some folks who really, really don't like it, because diversity means all people. Equity means fair access to opportunity. Inclusion means respect for belonging. And that inherently invites competition. They are not mad because it's not working. They're mad because they have to fight against too many other people who now have equal claim to the future. That's the challenge.
Amen to that. So what does it mean that some tiny fraction of our seats in the federal government are even up for competition?
It means that we are broken, but we can fix it. What's happened with the Calais decision, the decision that gutted the Voting Rights Act, took many, many, many people by surprise. And I don't know why. I've been talking about this for a few days. I've been raising the specter of voting rights for 33 years. I'm 52, so my math is short. But anyway, I've been doing this for a minute. And the issue with voting rights is that voting is the point of entry in a democracy to power. Therefore, the attacks on our voting rights did not begin with the attacks on the Voting Rights Act. It began with gerrymandering, with politicians trying to orchestrate the outcomes of elections without having to compete in the land of ideas. And we've allowed it to happen because we like the people we like and we say, well, pox on anyone else. We have to get to a place where democracy actually functions in this country because people actually have to compete. That means representational democracy. That means going perhaps to the multi-representative systems that that countries have. It's about making sure that communities of interest can actually talk to each other. Gerrymandering is one specter of evil. Voter suppression writ large is another version. But so is the defunding of communities so that they can't afford to worry about politics. You don't cut SNAP benefits simply because you want poor people to be hungry. You do it because you want them to believe democracy can't serve them. You allow the Social Security benefits to be tenuous at best because you don't want to have the conversation about why there is a cap on who has to pay into a system that pays for all of us to get old. So we've got to have conversations about the hard things, and those conversations can only happen when we decide that every seat should be competitive. There might need to be more of those seats, and the competition for those seats cannot be managed by those who do not believe democracy should exist in the first place. We are in a competitive authoritarian nation. And if you go to 10stepscampaign.org, you can learn more about it, but that's way too long and you don't have any more time. So say it with me, say 10stepscampaign.org. I'll tell you all about authoritarianism and how we fight back.
There you go. So I have two last questions. We'll try and get them in. The first is actually building on what you just said. So when I wrote Strong Floor, No Ceiling, a lot of people said to me,
it's fantastic.
well, thank you.
You should get that book.
So you heard it right here. 10 steps, but the question I had for you is, those ideas, and I shared with this audience before, are often thought of as an opposition. You can't tell people you're going to take care of them and that they're going to get those services. I tell people right at the beginning of the book, I'm not here to defend the old institutions, but you can't run a country with no institutions, right? But then you can't also be pro-success, pro-business, pro-limitlessness, right? And it's not about Strong Floor, No Ceiling, but how do we hold these oppositional ideas in our head and make them real for people?
We do it in our families all the time. I don't know why we suddenly lose our grasp on imagination and possibility when other people get to have benefit. This is not a nation that lacks wealth. This is not a nation that lacks opportunity. And this is not a nation that lacks imagination. But we're also not on a planet that has this problem. We have watched other people solve it. Our barriers to entry are not possibility, it's greed, and it's tribalism. It is a decision that I'm willing to go without if it means someone else doesn't get to have. That paucity of moral core is what we are most at risk of. I do not begrudge businesses doing well, but I do take exception to a business that does well, not at the expense of, but to the detriment of the communities they are in service of. Because ultimately, every business has a human consumer. And if the people who have to be your consumer can't afford to live in the society you are creating, that is a poor business model. I'm not asking businesses to be moral or even amoral, but I am asking them to be thoughtful, because there is harm that is done when we decide that the acquisition is more important than the experience. And that's the place we found ourselves in today.
So I have a 4-year-old, and one of his favorite books, I kid you not, is Stacey's Extraordinary Words. If you have kids, pick it up. It is awesome. And one of when I first read this book, first of all, it actually has a lot of words for a children's book, I will say. So it challenges a young person. But at the end of this book, and if you don't, so spoiler alert, if you care about the ending now. But at the end of this book, right?
Stacey loses.
Stacey, right? Stacey loses the spelling bee. And the person who wins it is not a nice person. You are sitting here as a leader with all the credentials and all the things and the wisdom that you have shared with this group. So the wisdom of losing with grace to someone like him might be relevant for today. Leave us with some wisdom for our moment right now through the lens of Stacey's Extraordinary Words and what you share with our kids.
So yes, Stacey loses, it happens. But the last scene is Stacey talking to her mom about one of her other favorite words, and that is perseverance. We use a lot of words. We talk about hope, we talk about opportunity. I like to say, I think hope is important, but hope hurts. Optimism feels like the thing we should do, and pessimism feels like giving up. I don't do any of that. I believe in determination. This future is ours to win. We simply have to be willing to persevere. We have to know that we have an extraordinary society made up of incredible people who have limitless imagination, if limited capacity. But rooms like this, nations like this, moments like this are ours to win if we decide that as hard as they want to make it, we will work harder. I am not guaranteed victory, but I am guaranteed to do as much as I can. I am guaranteed effort. And as long as my effort is in it, as long as our effort is in it, we may not get the victory we imagine, but they won't get theirs either, and that's the point. I appreciate the clapping, but I'm going to correct myself. The point isn't that they don't win. The point is that we win and that we take everyone with us. And I want to correct myself because the minute we start to think, even in this moment, that our rise requires someone else's sublimation, we are on the slippery slope to the place we're trying to get out of. So I correct and amend myself, and now you can clap if you agree.
Well, thank you. I have to say, I knew it was going to be an honor when we first communicated about you coming up here, and we basically did it exactly on time. But I just want to also thank all of you for the engagement. There was a round of applause after every answer Stacey gave. That does not happen in most places. So again, for your wisdom and for your time, thank you.